Hello. All right, so it's been a little while since I last published a video or did a live stream. That's simply because I was off most of last week and extremely busy the week before that. So mostly back to normal at this point. Actually, this week should be slightly busier than normal because I'm doing a live stream today, but then there should be the Incus 6.3 release tomorrow, and so most likely will be a release video on Friday covering that. So slightly busier week content-wise than usual, and then should go back to weekly live streams starting from that point on and starting next week effectively. Cool. So I figured like one of the things I would actually like to see included in Incus 6.3 is a initial beta of the OCI image support. Given the release is due tomorrow, we'll see what actually makes it in there. But I figured I would at least dust off my current code, look at implementing a few of the suggestions that people have made so far, and see if we can't put a few things in place already that's on the to-do list for this particular work. So that's the current pull request. Also, before Jared asks, we're actually lucky enough to have the cat in the room today. So let's see. Can we? Our camera is a bit short. Okay, it's gonna be tricky. Let's see. There we go. There you go. The cat is hanging out with me today. Hasn't been doing that too much lately, but today's one of those days, so that's good. Alright, let's put that camera back here. There we go. Alright, so that's the current pull request open. We also have an issue that has some more details in there, especially I think the remaining kind of to-do list is in the issue instead of the pull request. In the pull request, there were a couple of suggestions. And yeah, so in this case, like there was a calling as subprocess instead for a library. I didn't respond to that one. That's for the initial pass. It's much easier for us this way. We do intend to switch to directly using the internal packages of both Scorpio and Umochi in the future. But it didn't seem like it was perfectly split in a way we could just straight up consume. I'll probably take another look at that maybe today, maybe after the 6.3 release, to see if that can be done. It would definitely be preferable than having to now require everyone have those commands around. But this is a good first pass anyways. The other thing, and that's something I can probably try and sort out in this live stream, is there were some don't laugh on GitHub pointers that there are actually definitions of existing Go definitions as part of the Open Containers runtime specs for the fields that we're passing in the JSON. So instead of having to re-implement part of that struct to just get that data in, it's possible to use those existing definitions. The main question there is going to be, what does that do to our dependency chain? Like, we don't like growing our Go dependencies too much. And I was looking actually at the Go module for that one. I don't see one in there. It's in specs Go. Okay, so there's no obvious Go modules listed. Maybe I missed it. Let's see. Did I miss something? Or is it under schema? Okay, I don't see any Go mod in there, which is slightly unfortunate to figure out what the actual downstream impact will be. But once we start using it, we'll immediately see what that brings as far as dependencies. It should just be effectively a JSON schema that shouldn't really bring anything significant as a dependency, but who knows? There might have been some kind of imports in there out of convenience that might cause us to bring in a bunch of dependencies that we don't want to. This particular file does not. Like, the only thing that's imported is a built-in package here, OS, but I don't know what the other files inside of the same Go package might be bringing in, so we'll see. But in general, that's definitely the better approach of just using those existing definitions, and I'll try and do that today. The rest of the to-do list is now here. And I did do a few things since the last live stream. So in the last live stream, we got to the point where it was possible to launch instances, and did a bit of tweaking here and there. But there was got a few things missing, especially IPv4 support, also handling more complex kind of entry point commands. So that's not been improved, and actually look up in there. So that was the initial demo. Okay, so that was still fine. So I think I posted, okay, yeah. So the update effectively since the last live stream was like environment support. I think I did that during the live stream, that worked fine. libelxc, I'm using libelxc's execute now instead of using start. The implication is that effectively we get our own small init process in there that can handle child processes dying and all that kind of stuff properly. So that's good, but it needed a GoLXC fix, which I had to do upstream, which then broke, made us not enter the test suite for GoLXC, needed a bunch of dusting off and fixing, so I had to do that. So that effectively took me a day pretty much to just sort that one out. As I said, like the entry point, parsing and handling, that's been fixed up. I effectively use the same parser that we're using for more complex shell type commands, and that worked just fine. So that's in place and that fixed. I think it was the WordPress image that was running into that issue. Anyway, that got fixed. Then the console handling works fine now, so you don't you can immediately attach to a temporary instance. It starts, it gets you the console, it exits, and you're so good and clean. And I wrote a small DHCP client that's now built into Incus that can run in the right namespace, get an IP address, get basic DNS and all that stuff in place. So it effectively populates etcresolve.conf and configures IP connectivity, so that you get all of that working properly inside of those containers. So that's what I did. And then the things that kind of left to do, the first thing I'll probably try and do in this live stream, which is add a bit of data. So that's probably going to be a volatile key on the instance, so that we can know whether the instance is a system container, so our default, or if we detected OCI. And consume that. Also needs to kind of clean up the DHCP client a bit. I don't know actually what was missing there. I need to look at the code again. It's probably fine for now. Like, it's probably fine for beta, and then if people run into issues with it, we'll tweak it from that point on. Like the reality is that most of those application containers, they're not going to have incredibly difficult setups with like multiple interfaces and all that kind of stuff. So it should be okay. The other thing, like, then after that we've got a category of things that should take care, well, that are going to go together, which is environment config keys and proxy devices. Those needs to be processed ahead of time. So when the container is created, those should be looked at and then added as config keys instead of being implemented kind of behind the scenes as a hidden thing like they are right now. So that's a bit more work that we need sorting out. I think that's probably still gonna make it into the beta, so that's good. A config key for auto restart, that one I'm not sure I'm gonna get to do before tomorrow, so we'll see. Effectively, the idea there is that there should be a config key that says, hey, if the container dies, it should get respawned. That's good, but there needs to be a bit more than that. If we just have a simple key that's like yes, no, and we have it auto restart, a badly running container is going to get into a restart loop, use a lot of resources, and slow down the entire system. We don't want that. There should be like a progressive retry and eventually giving up type thing. which means need to keep track of how many, like when was the last time it was restarted, and how many times it went through restart effectively since the last time it was purposefully started or stopped by the user. Not super difficult to do, but we don't like hammering our database, so I don't want that to necessarily be stored in the database either. It might be something we want to store just simply in memory, like a mapping of container ID to like when was the last time it was restarted and how many times was it restarted. So that might be a bit trickier than it sounds. The other thing that's left to do is improving kind of performance and that progress reporting. The progress reporting, I think I should be able to do in this live stream because that's pretty straightforward and can show you how it works. The performance improvement, probably not, because that's going to be a bit trickier. And that's also where I might take another stab at seeing if we can't just use built-in logic from Umochi, for example, to avoid calling their command line tool and instead just consuming it that way, which would then save us effectively one full unpack and repack cycle, which would be nice. Okay, so that's kind of the state of things. There's a question from Jared about how long it took to write a DHCP client. Effectively a couple of hours to get something, I think actually less than that, probably an hour to get something working. That's because there's a great Go package that lets you do DHCP, and I effectively just use that. I'm gonna just tweak the light a bit here, because as soon as I switched away from a light background, then I don't have enough light. So let's fix that. Okay, that's better. All right. So the first thing I need to do is this code is a bit old at this point, so I need to rebase that on what we have currently. And sure enough, it's conflicting on the with dependencies. I don't think we need this one anymore because I'm not bringing anything new at this stage, am I? Oh, I'm adding the DHCP. Okay, never mind. So yeah, we do need to regenerate that one. So just do go mod go sum make update go mod. There we go. I think that I ran a go mod update I think yesterday in another pull request, so we should be mostly up to date. There shouldn't be massive amount of changes other than pulling in the DHCP package effectively. So let's see. Okay, so there's one update here. Indeed, bringing in the DHCP client. There's a new release of libvsdb. Okay, cool. And the rest is just in like indirect things. Cool. So that's fine. Let's just continue. So rebase, not traffic. Continue. There we go. And okay, translations that also obviously changed since then. I'm just gonna update those. I'm just checking I didn't put anything I shouldn't. No, it's fine. Okay, continue. And voila. Okay, so that's all rebased now. So then actually refresh what's on GitHub, might as well, and can answer the question about the DHCP clients. Gonna see what that looks like. So if we go look at the commits here and we look forknet DHCP, so that's effectively the new client. It's pretty small. I need to use a bit of trickery because we need to run it inside of another network namespace. So we don't want the DHCP client to run on the host, we want it to run inside a container. And it's in a container that's currently being set up. So that needs a bit of special logic to be called from within an LXC hook. So that's what we kind of see here. I've extended the forknet command, which is like a hidden sub command we have in Incus. And it now can effectively treat or process a DHCP hook. So the way it works is we would call Incus forknet DHCP, and that's being called from an LXC hook. The LXC process ID is being pulled from the environment of the hook. From that, we get the network namespace identifier. From that, we attach to the network namespace, and then we just let it continue, which means we're jumping back into Go. And then in Go itself, we've got that same DHCP command is defined, importing the DHCP before client from that external package. And the actual command that runs the DHCP client is here, that's I think the part that I meant to update, which is here with ETH0. That should probably be changed so that we can deal with other interface names or something. Or most likely not. The reality is that, again, like most containers are going to be pretty simple. We usually do want to just run that on ETH0 anyways. That's what happens with all of our other network configuration. I think the main thing here is we should just not make it such that it doesn't fail if ETH0 does not exist. So effectively check if it exists. If it doesn't, just return, not do any DHCP config and move on. So I'm just going to leave myself a comment here, skip DHCP if not found, so that we don't want the hook to return with an error code, otherwise it's going to prevent the entire container from starting. So I just need to fix that. Then we're getting a new DHCP client. So bringing interface up, getting a new DHCP client, and then on that doing the DHCP exchange. So that means it will actually do the DHCP request, waiting from an offer, accepting the offer effectively. It will retry it up to 10 times at 500 milliseconds interval. So maximum time 10 seconds, 5 seconds effectively for DHCP. Once it gets that, it actually goes through and extracts the reply, assuming it got one. So in this case, the reply would be a lead. So it's a DHCP offer that was accepted. It then goes on and checks that you have, and again, I think that's something else that needs to be changed here, because if you disable DHCP on your network, this should not fail. It should just, like it can print a message saying, hey, couldn't get a lead, but shouldn't actually fail. So don't fail, just print a message. And the same thing for the next one, which is effectively it's not a usable DHCP response for us unless you've got an IP address in it, unless you've got a net mask, so the actual subnet mask, and unless you've got a router and at least a DHCP server, a DNS server. So that's what this is all checking, and currently it just errors out. But again, this should print an error but not actually fail. So I'll be changing that. Next, we've got so actually extracting the size. So that means the slash value of the CIDR. So most times this is gonna give you 24 as the result effectively. And then from there we go on and apply the address directly on the interface. So we get the address slash the CIDR mask, add the address. Then do the same thing for the default gateway, add that. Then we go on and we create a resolve.conf file and write to it. This is not directly being written as /etc/resolve.conf. The way this actually works is we're creating a temporary path for those kind of files. And then they are getting bind mounted in place. So that's, I believe, the same way Docker does it. That should work fine. Yeah, so there's a question around like, does a DHCP client query Incus specifically? It doesn't. It's just a DHCP client. So that was kind of that was the benefit of it. My initial approach to this problem was, DHCP, bit of a pain for application containers because we don't really want to keep the process running. It's a bit annoying to manage leases and all that stuff. So because we are the ones running the DHCP server, we could just go and reserve a static IP, apply that to the container and move on. The problem with that approach is if you just want your application container to sit on a network that is not managed by Incus, so if you want to put it on your LAN, then that's not going to work. Whereas this approach will. This approach will run a normal DHCP client, it will get the IP, it's fine. The one thing to keep in mind is this is not a long-running DHCP client, so we're not really respecting that part of the normal DHCP handling. Like normally for a long-running system, and those containers may be long running, you are supposed to keep your DHCP client running, and you're supposed, as soon as your lease expires, you're supposed to go and renew it. This is not going to do any renewal for you. The good thing though is that I believe it's in the DHCP spec. If not, it's at least part of most of the DHCP servers. Even an expired lease, they're not gonna be giving that to someone else so long as it still responds to pings. So if the DHCP server is about to hand out a lease for an IP it used previously, it is gonna be trying to reach that address. If it answers to pings, it will not give out that address and will move on to something else. So that should avoid this eventually getting into an IP conflict type scenario. The risk is that when the container restarts, it might pick up a different address. If depending on the length of your lease and what your DHCP server does when the lease expires, you might get a different address. You probably won't when running on Incus itself, because we use DNS mask. And DNS mask doesn't do like an incremental allocation of its IP addresses. It derives the last part of the IP address from the MAC address. It's not fully stable because obviously you can't fit 48 bits of MAC addresses into 8 bit of machine address, but it is reasonably stable, and so that avoids that should not cause the IP address to change, even if you're running the container for a long time. This is something that could be improved, that we could keep a process running inside the container and have that handle lease renewal. The question is like whether the containers are gonna like that. Not all container images will be happy to see other processes running. It would also be a bit awkward because from a process tree point of view, that process would be parallel to the init process and not a descendant of the init process, which is not something that's very common and not something that's really usually possible on a physical machine. So effectively, inside the container, you would see PID1, which is the init process, and then everything underneath it. But then you would see our DHCP server, DHCP client being PID2 most likely, but not being a descendant of PID1. That might make things a bit weird and confusing, so we'll see. I think this is one of those cases where, like, for a beta, that will do perfectly fine. And then based on feedback during the beta, if this is causing issues, then we can look at ways to handle things like renewal. So that's the DHCP client. What else was in there that has changed? So update dependencies are just to pick up the DHCP client. Basic OCI registry client, OCI remote support, all that stuff I showed in the last live stream. Nothing has changed. Same thing with the CLI config, that hasn't changed. The OCI registry support also hasn't changed. And I think this one changed a bit. So that's the actual logic, like the startup logic for application containers. And that parses the JSON and all of that. So that part I wrote during the stream, I think last time, and we got that going. The bits that had to change a bit are around the entry point, which I'm looking for now. There we go. So I'm using shellquote, which is that same package we use to process like the QEMU command line options and that kind of stuff. So I can, with shellquote, I can pass it the arguments list, and it will get me that in a properly escaped shell command that can then be passed to LXC and then eventually be passed over to the kernel. So that fixed the issue. I believe it was WordPress that wasn't happy. So that fixed that one. Then UID, GID, and after that's changed. But what has been added then is the network handling. So we're effectively creating a directory called network, which is stored within our own configuration, like storage space for the container. So it's not visible inside the container. In the container itself, we do make sure /etc exists. We then generate a host file, so basic host file with just the loopback device and the right name for the instance. We also generate a hostname file for it with the name of the instance, and we then create an empty resolve.conf file. Those files are then being put in place through bind mounts. So we've got bind mounts for all three files. And then lastly, there's the hook that calls forknet DHCP with the path that it needs to write to. So that's how that works. And then on startup, that effectively calls the DHCP client, and things get configured. So that's the state of things. I'm sure some people would like to see it, so let's try that. It's been compiled, so now I just need to switch over to that binary on my system. There we go. Okay, so we're running now on a OCI capable Incus. And let's kind of start with the basics. So let's just do Incus launch. I think I still have the Docker remote. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Incus launch, Docker, hello world. Let's make that ephemeral and attach to the console. See how it works. So what that should do is actually connect to the DockerHub, pull the hello world image, convert it, download it into Incus, and then apparently fail miserably. What did I mess up? Oh, actually, I did the rebase. Did I actually build it? I don't think I did, so that's why. Let me fix that for you. It failed because it probably tried to use the Incus protocol against the DockerHub, which is not really gonna work. So let me actually build that code and then try again. That should work a lot better. All right. And yeah, normally that would have failed with a better error, but it would have failed when you add the remote. In this case, I already had run an Incus version that supports OCI, added the remote then, and then went back to a version that doesn't, so that caused that issue. So let's try hello world again. There we go, downloading the image, running, done. So in this case, it does show, so that's the output from Incus itself. So launching the instance, it picked a random name, so the rest it ghost. Then it shows the hello world message, and then it exited. And because I made it ephemeral, it should not be around. Yep, it's all gone. I'm trying to remember what we used last time for testing. Was it? It was like some kind of reverse proxy. Which one was it now? I mean, let me check if I've got stuff left over in the demo project I used last time, maybe. Because, nope, I don't. What was it? Was it? It wasn't HA proxy, I don't think. Was it just Caddy or something? Was it that one? Yeah, I think it was. So I could probably try it out again. Because I think it just shows you kind of your IP address by default, so that's a good one to try. So let's do that again. Launch. I'd love to do WordPress again, but yeah, WordPress just takes too long to convert right now. So and since we don't have the feedback, like the progress feedback yet, it just gets a bit boring. So let's just do that, and then showing that stuff works. Well, actually, this one's a bad example. The way I'm launching it, but we'll see why shortly. Because this is launching Caddy with a console. Okay, so we actually, never mind, it's fine. We see it running. I was thinking, like, this is ephemeral, so the moment it exits, it's gonna be gone. But it's fine. It just showed me the startup here. So it is up and running. And if we do, all right. So Control C in the console, obviously not a good idea because that killed it. So let's just launch it again. This time without ephemeral, without console. Okay. So it's knowing Llama, sure. And unlike last time, this time you notice that it actually has both IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. So let's make sure that they both work. Okay, that's fine. And then IPv4. There you go. So that works perfectly fine. And of course, if we go inside it, I don't know if there's bash in that image. We'll see soon enough, I guess. So plain shell. We can go in there, can check the host name. Host name is correct. We've got a host file. We've got resolving in place, so we can go and resolve things. It works perfectly fine. That's a pretty big difference from last time around, where we had an IPv6 address because the kernel configures one for us, but there was no working DNS, no IPv4 connectivity, none of that. So yeah, that's kind of the state of things right now, and that works, I think, well enough for a lot of cases. And effectively anything else that Incus container support, this also supports it. So we can go and set, like CPU limits, memory limits, there. Size 10 gig, root size 10 gig. So all of that stuff works perfectly fine. The memory doesn't show because it's using Alpine, which requires system call interception, so we can actually try that next. The uptime is correct. I don't think I've got the CPU in there, do I? But CPU info should be fine. So let's actually try to also set syscall interception just for fun. But at the end of the day, it is an LXC container. Like, there's nothing particularly special. So anything we support on LXC just works just fine here. Sysinfo, true. That's one of the keys that need an actual restart. Okay. So if we go in here, memory, there we go. Now we've got the memory limits from sysinfo. So system call interception, all that stuff works perfectly fine. We could pass in, USB devices, extra paths, all that stuff exactly the same way we normally do. So that's I'm actually really looking forward to having that in 6.3 because my own, I run a bunch of Docker stuff for my IoT environment. So if I go look at my production IoT Docker host effectively, which is a container here, I think this is actually it's an ARM container. And it's got a bunch of IoT dongles to like IoT radios to access Zigbee, Z-Wave, and RTL 433. So the 433 megahertz type devices, and that accesses a lot of my stuff on top of having some basic kind of support containers to provide MQTT on top of the 433 megahertz, and also as a gateway between my account with my utility company and my home assistant. So all of that stuff currently runs in Docker inside of an Incus container. With Incus 6.3 and the beta for the OCI support, I'll be able to just get rid of all of that and run them directly on Incus. So I'm looking forward to that. The other thing I'm running is Frigate, which is what analyzes like all of the camera feeds for my property and lets me know if like there's raccoons tearing up the backyard, which has been a thing for the past few weeks, or delivery person coming in the driveway, or someone at the door or anything. So this is another case where it's run through Docker because that's effectively the only thing to support. This is kind of the stupidest setup right now because it's literally a Incus container that then runs a single Docker container. So looking forward to flattening all of that. Yeah, I think I'll probably have some recordings of the raccoons, maybe. Let's see. I don't know if they tripped the detection last night. Let's see. So that's the current feeds. Let's see, events. That was me moving around. Did we have any? The chickens, birds. So you can see some of the handiwork of the raccoons here. That's what happens when you, oops, I guess we'll see it more here. those roll of grass that's supposed to be nice and flat, they're all like torn apart and rolled up because they want to get to the worms underneath. So yeah, that's the fun stuff from the raccoons. That was still this morning. There we go, nighttime. That looks like a raccoon messing things up. Not sure what considers it to be a bird, it's clearly not, but there you go, you get a raccoon busy tearing apart my backyard. So yeah, we've been fighting with a bunch of those for a while. It mostly gets to notify me, and I can go and yell at them and run after them to try and get them off my property, but not very successfully. Anyways, that's the fun of living here. So yeah, there's a question about the cameras. The cameras I'm using, I mean, everything is hardwired, so it's PoE cameras for everything, and it's usually whatever is cheapest on Amazon, basically. That's because I'm a bit of a, I'm really into networking and stuff, so I've got a completely separate VLAN for all of my cameras that has absolutely no internet access whatsoever. And then I've got one container that has access to that subnet that connects over RTSP to all of the cameras, and then acts as like a clean proxy for anything else that needs to pull those feeds. So effectively only a single container is allowed to access the cameras, and the cameras are allowed to access absolutely nothing. So that means I can buy whatever dodgy stuff, and even if it tries to connect to some server in China or some server anywhere else, it doesn't matter. So long as it can do RTSP, I'm good. So that's been a general approach, because those vendors, they keep popping up and off on Amazon or whatever else, and spending a lot of money for just the name brands to be put on the same hardware is not really worth it. So that makes it nice and flexible. I used to be running Unify cameras for a while, but those were reasonably expensive, and I also never wanted their on-site recorder, so their NVRs. And I used to run Unify Video, which was like a software stack I could run in the data center off-site. But then when they switched to Unify Protect, they only support it on their own hardware on-site, which effectively made it a big no-go for me. It effectively turned all of my cameras into bricks when that happened, because this effectively stopped supporting the old software stack. Just give up on that entirely, and that's why I'm using Frigate, which is like an open source NVR with like fancy detection. So I'm using a Google Coral stick over USB that does all of the AI inferencing model stuff to analyze all of the camera feeds and do the detection of like, oh, there's a bird, there's a cat, which often means raccoon, and doing all of that for me, which has been working pretty well, and that ends up being pretty low on CPU usage as well. And because of that setup, I can run both an on-site server here that deals with a lot of the feeds, especially the feeds I don't want to see anywhere else, like the few feeds I've got inside the house. And then I've got an off-site server that gets a lower quality version of all of the outdoor feeds, but keeps them for much longer. So that kind of gives me like the best of all worlds, where I can very quickly get my events and notifications and stuff and look at recordings here. But at the same time, I've got everything also backed up offsite. Anyway, that's for what I'm doing with Docker today. And yeah, both of those cases I can completely move to running on Incus itself. Another one that will be a bit more complicated, but I'm also looking forward to finding a way to dealing with that, is the Linux containers forum itself. So this is running Discourse, and same thing. It's a container, like it's an Incus container that runs a single Docker container. I mean, the Incus container itself runs a few more things. So outside of that Docker container, it does run database as Postgres. It runs the email gateway for traffic in and out of the forum. That's run directly inside the container. But the bulk of the thing is actually all running inside Docker. And so being able to avoid having that intermediate level layer to manage here, and just being able to run Discourse directly on Incus would also be quite nice. So looking forward to that. All right, let's actually get a few things done. So the first thing was the dealing with the DHCP client and making it a bit less picky. So this is gonna be inside of command incus d main forknet, and then there's the DHCP part in here. There we go. So that's the part where it starts with actually checking for trying to bring the link up, and if this fails, then everything fails. I'm gonna go check if our IP link has a way to just check if it exists cleanly. If it does, then we can definitely use that. That would be nice. If it doesn't, I'm just gonna make this error non-fatal and make it exit effectively. Alright. So I want to check internal server IP, I think, link there. Okay, what commands do we have on there? So we've got setup, set down, set MTU, set IP address, set no master. So a bunch of commands to set things. I've not seen a simple does it exist. So anyway, it's fine. I also wanted to check. Yes, this is gonna fail with an error we can't easily analyze. It's fine. So we're just gonna make this non-fatal, and gonna be assuming effectively. Yeah, I guess for us it's gonna be fine. So we can use the logger. It's kind of pointless using the logger, to be fair, because at this stage we don't really have. Yeah, never mind, I'm not gonna do it. I was gonna say use the logger because that's what we do for everything, but this is called from a hook, so there's no logging in place. So we should probably just do it the old-fashioned way. So let's do an fprintf in std and just say giving up on DHCP couldn't bring up, and I don't really like that interface being repeated everywhere, so I'm just gonna do iFace 0, and that way it's, if we ever want to support other interfaces, it's gonna make it much easier. So just do iFace like that, and 9 break. Okay, so that should give us an error. Gonna bring up the interface, fine. Cool. Then we do the DHCP here. There's like no actual meaningful errors we're dealing with, that's fine. And then we've got the didn't get a lease. So same deal, we're just gonna go giving up on DHCP, couldn't get a lease on interface after 5 seconds. I think it's a timeout. Yeah, after 5 seconds. Next up is giving up on DHCP, lease did not contain what we need. Lease for interface name didn't contain needed information, required information, or required fields, I guess. There we go. So that should take care of that. There's another if th0 here needs to go away. iFace, and I think there's another one up a bit. Yeah, there is here. Do that one too. Check we've got them all. Weird. Cool. So that should take care of that part on the DHCP client by making it just less picky. Let's see that everything looks good. There's a question around, like, you know, are we gonna be extending and do things more like Swarm with support for secrets and configs and like? Not initially, and even if we do, we would probably try not to make them be specific to the just to those OCI containers, but have facilities to safely handle that for everything that we run. Like we've got. It's gonna be kind of interesting. Like we do have a good facility for exchanging data between Incus and the containers, which is the dev Incus socket. This will be also available with OCI containers, but that needs then proper support inside the container to access that instead. I think most people with application containers tend to use environment variables for a lot of that stuff, which is fine. We might be able to do something like supporting templating within environment variables, so you can have them be templated off of config keys or something like that. But the other thing that I think was brought up on in the GitHub issue was like, how do I set those environment variables to contain secrets without them showing up in my bash history or in the process list? And the answer to that is we support reading from JSON, from YAML, so you can, or JSON technically. So you can do an Incus create of some image and then have that read the YAML or JSON definition of the instance, which then can include all of these environment variable keys directly, and they will never show up in your process list or bash history or anything, and they'll just end up getting stored within Incus and then exposed as an environment variable to the workload. Alright. So that's where that built just fine. I'm just gonna do a quick go format and I'm gonna merge that commit with the existing one since none of that has been merged upstream yet. So that's gonna be included in the Forknet DHCP. There we go. There's a question about how can you join the Incus development team. There's no real joining. If you want to get contributing, we've got a bunch of open issues on GitHub. You can pick one, especially those that are marked as easy. We can assign it to you. You can start working on it, sending pull requests. We can review code directly. It's like all nice and open. And there are other ways to also contribute to Incus, like whether it's helping out on the forum, writing tutorials, writing blog posts, or helping out with translations. All of those we've got links for just about every one of those things directly in the README on the repo. All right. Okay, so this is built, it's all good. I'm just gonna do a quick static analysis. I don't remember if the code is currently static analysis clean, so I might as well just do a quick run of that to make sure it is. And then try to remember what else was on the list. So progress info is definitely something I wanted to look at today, so I might do that. Wanted to use those definitions. So I think I'm going to do that one next because that should be pretty straightforward. And I'm also kind of curious as to what that's going to bring in as dependencies. So once we know that the current state of things is clean, I'm going to go and look at changing from my currently hard-coded structures to using those external ones, and then see what that looks like as far as what's being pulled by Go. Okay, I think we're pretty far into static analysis. We're probably clean then, because it's cleared the stuff that usually fails, so that's good. Okay, yeah, all clean, cool. All right, so it's in internal server instance, driver LXC, that we've got the structs that we want to replace. I think if I look for like CWD, I should find it. Yeah, there you go, OCI config. So process, I need to find the actual correct struct. That I don't think is this one. Actually, it might be process, and then process includes everything else. So I think that might be the correct one. So it's the spec. That's good. And let's see. So process is in the process struct, which is down here. Yeah, and it's got everything else we need. Cool. So let's use that. And yeah, we want specs. It's gonna be, what's the package name? Specs. Okay, I'm gonna be renaming that an import because that's not very specific. It's like, so we'll do OCI specs and then GitHub com, and it's runtime specs, open containers runtime specs. Okay. Okay, so that's effectively that we need to import. Actually, it's this. Then when that it's runtime. Is it runtime runtime specs? No, probably specs.go. That should be fine. And if we look for that tract, that here. Okay, so we should be able to get rid of all of the OCI config stuff, and then make that a OCI specs dot spec. Yeah. Okay. Alright, so that was kind of expected. Make go mode, and we'll see what that pulls in. Okay. So what's the damage? So it's putting that one in and nothing else. Okay, cool. So every single thing that it would have picked already, we already have the dependency somehow. So it's all good. That's very reasonable. And is that really compiling the first time around? I'm kind of surprised. Okay. I'm surprised because that means that the naming I used for the Go fields ends up lining up exactly with their naming for the same Go fields. And there wasn't really any guarantee of that because we might have used different capitalization or some other changes, but apparently we're using the exact same names. So that's cool. Alright, well, I'm just gonna do a quick Go format because the import order might be slightly different. Yeah, it is. Okay. And gonna commit my internal server change here and commit the Go mod stuff. And yeah, I use silly commit titles. That's just what I do for then being able to know what is what here. So this one can actually go be merged directly here. And this one needs to go in the Go mode piece, but now the Go mode piece should probably come last, given like just making the order makes sense. Okay. Like in general, I'm trying to keep the branch not only clean, but also have it be as buildable as possible, but also not having duplicate commits. Like I don't want to have two different update Go mode within the same branch. So that's good. Now the other place where we've got a hard-coded struct is in the client, I believe. So it's in client OCI images probably. And there's that OCI info thing here. Now, what spec would that be? So that's probably an image spec or something like that. Because that's the runtime, so that's not the same one. I think the reporter actually linked me to both. So let me just go look back at the conversation here. Okay, so that's been fixed. That's been fixed. Okay. This one. Yeah, so image spec, most likely. So content containers image spec. Okay, let's go look at that. This one. And same structure, so it's specs go, fine. This one is version, so it's probably specs go v1 we need. And which one is it that we need? Is it an index? No, it is not. We need a line. Oh, so the actual piece we want is name digest created. Okay, so it's not this one. Nope. Media type would be kind of weird. Why not? Yeah, no. So not media type, not manifest. Layout? What's in layout? Nope. Descriptor? It's in descriptor. Oh, that's getting closer, but not quite. Yeah, I'm not actually sure what that is. Okay, let's maybe pull the image spec repo and just grab through it. That might be faster. Okay. Okay, it doesn't ultimately matter if you're raising that or not. It just makes things a bit cleaner. So created. Do we have a created field in there? Okay, so specs v1 config has created. Did I not look at config? That's odd. Yeah. So that's the history, which is not what we want. And then the image itself, maybe. It's got created, but doesn't have any of the other fields we need. And I guess Leah's data would probably be a better thing to look for. So do we have that in there? We do not. Okay, well, that answers that. Okay, so this is not something we can just pull from there. Maybe they've got other specifications that this would be part of. Distribution, maybe? Because it's pretty sure it's not in runtime. That wouldn't make too much sense for it to be in there. Because that's definitely the runtime stuff we're looking at. Yeah, doesn't look like it's gonna be in there. Again, we can just look for layers data. Yeah, not in there. Okay, let's go look at this one maybe. Repository and tags. Okay, so not that. What's in tags? Nope. That's kind of closer you'd think, because that would be the interaction with the remote registry. But anyways, that's fine. We'll just keep that one as it is, and maybe at some point I'll figure out what's the right struct is for this guy. So that's good. Let's keep it that way. And the other thing I wanted to try and sort out today, so effectively, yeah, using the external definition is done for the one place I can do it easily. Clean up the DHCP clients, that's fine. Those two I'm gonna do probably right after. Improve performance and progress, we'll see. But this one I want to try and do because that should be a pretty easy one. That said, there's a few places we need to modify for that. So internal instance, I think, is where the different keys are defined. So if we look at volatile, yeah. Okay, so we've got multiple sets of different volatile keys or different config keys. We've got instance configs, but then also containers. So config keys containers is what we want. And we effectively want a volatile key that's specific to containers. There we go. Can do probably volatile.container.type or something like that for lack of better names. So volatile dot. I mean, the other thing I could do is volatile.container.oci and make that a boolean. That might actually be easier. So I can do that as isBool. So it's an instance, it's a volatile key, and then volatile container OCI. Those comments are what generates the documentation, so it's pretty convenient. We'll do type bool and short description whether the container is an OCI application container. Okay, and might as well put the default value, so it's default description, and this would be false. Okay, so that adds the config key, so we can just commit that as it is and just do internal instance add volatile.container.oci. Okay, and then we need to update the documentation, so that's update metadata, that does that. which updates effectively two files, like one JSON file with all of our config options and a secondary, I think it's JSON actually, file that's used by the documentation generator. So that's done. We should see those two files being modified. There we go. Config options text. I'm just using the standard commit message for those. There we go. So that effectively adds that in. So the first chunk is what the documentation uses. The second chunk is what we expose over the API for anything that wants to do like tab complete of config options or that kind of stuff. So that key is now defined, so it could now be set, but it needs to actually be set by something. So we're going to go back in the container driver. So server instance driver LXC. Already have it open, never mind. But apparently it moved, so OCI specs, that will get us where we want. There we go. Okay, so this is the logic now on startup that that detects this is an OCI container. So effectively at this point here, we've already passed an OCI config, so we know that the container is an OCI container. So we can do mark the container and then OCI container. I don't remember the actual syntax now for volatile set, so let's see if I can find something. Okay, so there's a volatile set here. Is it in the right function though? It's in start common. Okay, cool. So that's fine. We can use that. Where do they get applied though? Okay, they get applied right after. So that's not good. I didn't see it. So there's a question like whether layers data is in the manifest definition for the OCI. I didn't see it, but if you can find it in their repo and post a link in the chat, then I'll definitely use it. I might just have missed it because I just clicked around that repo. Okay, so volatile set here is where we apply the config key. Do we do it again later? Let's see. Okay, looks like we do again here, yeah. Actually, no, that's the on stop. Okay, so no, we don't in the startup case. Cool. So for start common, let's go back to. Okay, where's that function again? Come on, there. Volatile set in start common. So we do one pass here, which is if we need to change the map. Looks like you did. Well, you found layers. I'm not sure if it's the same thing because I think. Let me just load that back up again. Yeah, the JSON field name that I've got is layers data. Was what you found is just layers. So I think we're looking at a different thing. Anyway, so back to this one. This volatile set is not gonna run in most cases, so that's fine. But then also this one, same thing, not running in most cases. This one does run every time. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna relocate this dude here to the bottom of that function so that we just apply effectively all the volatile stuff at the end just before making the backup. So that should be fine. And it lets us do other changes kind of throughout. So if we go back up a bunch. Okay. So I can then just set a key in there and that should do what we want. Which means if I look at the OCI logic, there we go, mark the container as an OCI container. So now we can just do volatiles dot container OCI is true. and we'll just have that be saved automatically. And we'll just handle the other case. Like, it's pretty unlikely that a container would go back and forth between being an OCI container and not. But we might as well just mark it there. So I think I would actually set it to empty, which should clear the config key. Clear OCI config key if present. And we can actually try and make this slightly smarter with expanded config. So if it's already set, then we clear it, otherwise we don't do anything. That might save us a tiny bit of CPU time, but meh, it's gonna be very negligible. Do the same thing here. If not util that is true. Okay. So hopefully that should then give us that extra volatile key. And then we can change the CLI a tiny bit to show us whether something is a container, an OCI container or not. So that's in place, and just restart Incus. Okay. Okay, I destroyed Caddy, looks like, so let's just launch Caddy again. Okay, it's there, and now let's go look at its config, and we should see that this is an application container, volatile container OCI true. Yep, bingo, it's good. Just for good measure, we're going to be launching a normal Ubuntu 24.4 container and making sure that it does not have that. Oops, images Ubuntu 24.4, there we go. I don't have it already, that's odd. Okay, and then go look at this, and it is not set, so that's good. Logic works as expected. So that particular code change here, that can go. I just need to actually commit that. So incus d instance ext add volatile container OCI. And I don't remember what I showed in the mockup here as far as how I wanted to list things. Okay, I just put app next to them. So let's make that happen. Just need to go and modify the CLI, specifically the list command. And the type is what we want, which is type column data is the name of that thing. Yeah, if not set, it's container. It handles ephemeral already as a thing it appends to it. But in here, what we effectively want to do is if info.config, it's probably expanded config. Like that. And then we want volatile container OCI. Do we have is true? Don't recall in the we do that in the client. We have this access to is true. Yeah, we do. Okay. So if anyone wondering what is true does, it's just a function that takes the string input, puts it to lowercase, and then checks it against a bunch of values that we consider to be true. So it's true itself, it's yes, it's one, and I don't remember if there's anything else. So that just deals with kind of those corner cases of like dealing with different spelling and different authorized values for that. So let's do that, and then we're just gonna be okay. I'm just so that's a bit where we actually mutate the thing. Yeah, okay. just gonna change the logic the flow a tiny bit. So we take the type if this is empty, and this becomes container, and then this we can then effectively, well, I think we can just append to it actually. So in this case, we're appending app if it's an application container, and then if it's ephemeral, we're further. Actually, this one I need. Do I do that? Yeah, I might. Yeah. Okay. So what we actually want is strings to upper of the type. If it's empty, then that becomes container. We then add app. If it's ephemeral, then we need to append ephemeral. But I think this also needs translation. At which point we can just use this as printf. It's fine. So current value, and then translation value, and that becomes the initial thing, and then translation for app. Okay. And then we do the exact same thing here, but this time it's ephemeral. Okay. And lastly, we return the value. So yeah, take the existing type, bring it to uppercase. If it's not set, that becomes container. If the OCI thing is set to true, then we add app to that. And then if it's ephemeral, we add ephemeral to that on top of it. So you can get app ephemeral. That's effectively the goal here. Let's see. Okay, so I did not import util in that particular Go package, so let me just sort that out. Okay. I should take care of that. And we can then try and list things. And here we go, container app. So now we know that this is an application container, and it's just reporting it correctly here. The other thing we might want to do is info. So for info, let's see what that looks like currently. Okay, it shows type container. So we probably want to do type application container. In that case, so that becomes incus info. And there's a lot of stuff in that file. That's still all the system stuff. No. And we do the exact same thing with the ephemeral thing already. Okay. So let's just do something like inst type that is literally that value. Then if it's empty, that becomes container. If it's ephemeral, so it's basically the same logic as I did earlier. And we just do this, that, and initial values, so inst type. And this was weirdly translated apparently. Anyway, like the format string for translations did not really suit itself for what I'm doing here, which is like appending even more stuff to it. So that's going to be a bit different. Translators will have to do it again, which is unfortunate, but that I think will be a better result anyways. Oops. So that here, and that becomes inst type. That's fine. And we'll do the same thing with adding if util is true of expanded config, and then the config key is volatile container OCI. So if that's there and it's true, then we want to add app. But I would actually be tempted to do application in this one because we don't have the same kind of space issue, so it would show container application ephemeral, which should be fine. Okay, also missing the import in this one. Here we go. And then let's see how that looks. So, Faro Tomcat. Container application, cool, that's fine. And then just launch another one. So, Caddy again. And this time we'll make it ephemeral to just try the other case. So there's a question like whether I missed the step where I'm restarting Incus. In this case, like all I'm doing right now is all in the CLI tool, so it's all in the client, so I don't need to move things and restart. And the way my path is set up on my system makes it like what's my actual path? It's quite a mess, but basically my path makes it so that anything that's within my Go bin directory takes precedence over anything coming from the system. So if we look at where my Incus binary is the one I just built. So that way I can iterate on the client without needing to move anything. It's just the server where I need to move the binary over the old one and restart. So yeah, we've got container app ephemeral here. So that's the longer name if you're doing just a one-time thing. And Incus info should do roughly the same thing. Container application ephemeral. Yep. Cool. So that's fine. I'll just commit that as Incus. Support for Volatile container OCI. Okay. And then update translations because we changed things a bit. And this is the commit I already have. So again, I'm just going to be rebasing things together. So I'm just moving this commit down and then doing a fix up on it. Like that. Okay, and we're a bit over an hour in, so that's probably gonna be it for this. But yeah, it's pretty good progress. I started using, well, fixed the DHCP client, started using those external definitions for those structs, added the kind of nicety of being able to quickly tell what's an application container and what's not. So that's pretty convenient. We could go further, and I think we will probably end up adding like a formal API key for it, because like I'm just currently looking at the volatile key, which is not the cleanest. So it might be that we literally have an extra field directly on the instance struct to get that data out. Doing so will and effectively compute that on the server side from the volatile key instead. Wouldn't make a huge difference. The main difference it would make would be, you know, say if it was called, I don't know, subtype or something, we could do, just like you can do type container, you can do subtype app or something like that to then filter based on that. That would be kind of neat. But I think for the time being, this is probably good enough. And yeah, I'm gonna go and work on some more of those other items. I want to see if there's anything we can do around Scopio and Umochi to either not call them at all or to make them a bit faster in the way we're interacting with them. And I also need to do that extra bit of logic, so that's the environment variables that are and the ports that are defined in the OCI image, that those gets turned into config. Like, I don't know if we can easily see that, but I guess if we look at Caddy, yeah, there we go. Oh, so actually here you can see the intermediate init process I was talking about. So this is the host side process. This is our tiny init process that's running here. So that's PID1 in the container, and then the entry point thing is underneath. So that just handles cleanly like any sub-process dying and yeah, that kind of stuff. But if we go look at the environment, that's passed in there. And is there anything useful? So KDE version, I think, is the only thing that was effectively set by the Docker image in this case. But that KDE version, if you go and look at the instance definition, which would be, say, this guy, you don't see it at all. There's no there's no environment keys in there. So that's gonna be the next thing I'm gonna fix, is just when we create, we effectively update the user's request, appending anything that's part of the container config. So you will be able to see the environment variables there, and you'll be able to change them and restart the container, which would be pretty nice. I think that's something that's a bit painful to do with Docker. So being able to easily do it would be rather neat. Yeah, so there was a comment. Like, I remember the comment from Jonathan. I don't remember exactly what he said, but let me check. So yeah, so I think there was this one. They mentioned that we might be able to not use like not need to actually unpack, but just do it like either through, what was his suggestion? Like do it effectively unprivileged, which we could do through Fuse effectively, and that might work. So either do the simple conversion, so that's what a UFS to over LFS does, is that it does that correction, and then use DOM/FS to kind of convert things back. We'll have to see. Like, ideally for us, like I've not looked at the internals of Umochi. If it can indeed within Go just spit it back out to us as a tarball, that would be ideal, because then we don't need to run as root. We don't need to use the intermediate file at all. But otherwise, there are indeed tools that might let us just convert things kind of in place and then just tar them back out. I also know that one of the other maintainers, so like we've got a bunch of maintainers working on Incus. One of them is Alex SRI, who is the upstream of Umochi, so that kind of helps for that aspect of things. Another maintainer, Serge Allen, has actually done similar work at Cisco with their own container runtime. So there's a bunch of things we can do to optimize things. To improve things there. And yeah, like Jonathan is also a friend of the project. We keep hanging out with him at conferences and stuff, so I can also reach out to try and see what we can do there. Like, indeed, the current logic we've got is very slow. There's actually one simple thing I wanted to do to improve, which is just not using XZ. Switching to Z standard for those images will also make things significantly faster. But again, like, the goal currently is to get something that as far as the user experience is close to what we want, because we never want to put code in a Incus release and then have to change the API. So I think on the API side, we're pretty happy with what we have now. And there's a lot of potential for performance improvement in the future to make things quite a bit faster. And like, this is just kind of scratching the surface too, because this will still be pulling the layers, unpacking them, combining them together, and loading that as an Incus image. There is the other big piece of work to do at some point, which is to actually support storing layers within the Incus image store, so that instead of storing like a flattened image, we would actually store the individual layers, and then have a special OCI image type in the image store that will then know if you have the dependencies on the layers and assemble it at startup time by using something like overlayFS on startup time, effectively turning it into a much more normal OCI container runtime in that regard. But that's going to be a lot more work, and that gets very tricky for us, because currently there is no dependencies between a container and an image. An image can go away as the second the container is created. It's perfectly fine. There's no issue on our side. Also, images don't depend on other images. We don't have any support for that. So there's going to be a bunch of changes that are needed to try and improve that side of things once we start trying to optimize the storage aspects. The other catch there is, like, within a cluster we do image replication, but again, we don't have any such thing as dependency, so we don't care on what machine they get replicated. Obviously, in this case, we would care. So that's gonna be interesting for like a down the line, trying to make things a lot more efficient, not only in the initial conversion but also on the storage aspects of things. Well, so the question about like why would we want to keep them as individual layers when we combine them to run a container? Well, it's because we wouldn't combine, like we would combine them artificially, right? So right now we actually combine them in that we turn that into a single file system, and then the container goes and run with that. What we would do, if we can keep them separate as separate layers, is do the same thing as Docker does, which is you combine them like virtually through overlayfs. By having overlayfs layer all of the images, and then you need to do a VFS ID map layer to do all of the UID and GID mapping layer. And then that becomes the root file system of the container, with only the changes being written to the container volume, everything else just staying, being read from the read-only images. That's the part where like you then effectively avoid all of the storage duplication and all of that stuff. But to fit that within our existing image model, that's a bit tricky, and we'll have to see when we start looking into that, because that's purely optimization territory. Like as far as usability, nothing would be different. But if you're dealing with some of the images, actually like the ones that Jonathan usually deals with at NVIDIA, those images can be several gigs large. So having effectively, and like the base image might be like 99% of those images might be shared with other images. So if you start a dozen containers, each from a slightly different image, you're going to end up using potentially tens, if not hundreds of gigs, when you could just be using maybe 5 gigs. So that's where there's a massive difference and massive benefit from actually tracking the layers separately, using overlayfs to combine them, and only having the instance storage store the delta effectively. And that's the thing that like doesn't make any sense for us on the VM layer or on the system container layer, but it makes a lot of sense when you're looking at application containers. So something to probably look at some point down the line. All right, so I think I kind of covered everything. I said like we've got a release of Incus 6.3 tomorrow, so I'm hoping I get to just polish enough of those items to send the pull request and actually get that initial support in. The good thing is that like the pull request as it stands, even with the changes that I did today, if I push those now, it's pretty small. It's really not that complicated. Like I just updated it now in place. Here we go. Yeah, total change, it shows 30 files, but it's because a lot of them are just translations and like yeah, 3,800 lines added, 3,000 lines removed. So it means the actual total stuff being added, because a bunch of that is translations, it's going to be 800 lines or so. So it's really quite small, really quite simple. So it should be pretty easy to add as like pretty low risk, because a lot of it is also boilerplate, as is the case like with our OCI client here. So we should be able to put that in, get some initial feedback, start seeing who can start using that, those who can't, why they can't. And for why they can't, the question is going to be, do we care or not? Like we don't want us to be like a full one-to-one mapping to what Docker or Kubernetes or any of those platforms can do. Like there's a reason for them existing. But we also, what we effectively want to see go away is those kind of cases where people are running that they're running a lot of Incus containers, but then one of them just runs Docker to run a single container inside it. That use case should go away, and with this work, it really should be fine. All right, thanks a lot for watching. Again, there's a release coming out this week, so probably gonna be a video showing up on the channel on Friday, and then back to kind of normal schedule with weekly live streams coming from that point on. Thanks a lot, and yeah, see you in the next one. Bye.